In the beginning, there was silence. Not the silence of absence, but the profound quiet that comes before creation itself. Long before the first pyramid rose from the desert floor, before the first ziggurat touched the heavens, there existed a world that knew nothing of gods or kings or the written word. But the ancients remembered. In the oldest libraries of humanity, pressed into clay by hands that have turned to dust 5,000 years ago, there are whispers of what came before. The Sumerians, who gave us the wheel, mathematics, and the first cities, also left us something else. They left us a memory of the time before memory. This is not a tale of myth or legend, though it has been called both. This is the story written in humanity's oldest voice, speaking of a world that existed in the deep time before the gods descended from the heavens. A world both familiar and utterly alien. A world waiting in darkness for the light that would change everything. The Sumerian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, speaks of a time called the Before Time, a period when heaven and earth were not yet separated, when the waters above and below had not been divided. But there are older texts, fragment tablets found in the deepest archaeological layers that speak of what truly was. In these oldest writings, preserved in the temple archives of Nippur and Uruk, the scribes describe a world of endless waters. Not the ordered seas we know, but Tiamat, the primordial ocean of chaos, stretching without boundary beneath skies of perpetual twilight. The texts tell us that in this time, there was no sun to mark the day, no moon to measure the night. The sky itself was shrouded, a veil of mist and cloud that dimmed whatever light struggled to penetrate. This was Earth before the clearing of the heavens, before the ordering of the celestial sphere. And yet, the tablets insist there was land. Not the continents as we know them, but scattered islands of volcanic stone, rising from the deep waters like the bones of some sleeping titan. Steam rose perpetually from these islands, where fire from the earth's heart met the primordial sea. Life existed here. The Sumerian word is namu-shagar, the plants of the original waters. The scribes describe them as neither fully of the land nor of the sea, but something between. Great fronds that needed little light, drawing sustenance from the volcanic soil and the mineral-rich mists. But the most remarkable claim in these ancient texts is this: the world was not empty. Long before the Anunnaki, before any mention of the gods who would shape human destiny, something was already here. Something the Sumerians called Igigi Na'am, the Watchers who were first. The texts are fragmentary here, damaged by time and perhaps by intention. But what remains suggests that these beings were not gods, as the Anunnaki would be. They were creatures of the deep waters, dwelling in the abyssal places where volcanic heat warmed the eternal ocean. One tablet, known to scholars as the Eridu Genesis fragment, describes them as eyes in the darkness and minds in the deep. They possessed intelligence, these early inhabitants, but not form, as we understand it. They were awareness without body, thought without flesh. The scribe who wrote this tablet added something unusual, a personal note, forbidden in the formal religious texts. He wrote, "My teacher's teacher was told by his teacher that the deep ones remember when the sky was sealed, when no light from beyond could touch the world. They remember when the waters were all, and they knew peace in the darkness. These beings, the texts suggest, had created something beneath the waves. Not cities as we would recognize them, but structures of thought and purpose, woven from the living currents of the ocean itself. Places of contemplation in the deep, where the first intelligence of Earth pondered existence in the twilight world. They had no need of the surface, no desire for the harsh volcanic lands. The deep was their realm, and there they remained, watching the slow cycles of the covered earth, patient beyond human understanding. But the texts tell us that the watchers in the deep knew something was coming. The oldest fragments speak of disturbances in the cosmic order, ripples in the fabric of existence that preceded the Great Change. The primordial beings felt it first, a presence approaching from beyond the veiled sky, from the place the Sumerians would later call the heavens of Anu. Something was descending toward the twilight world, something that would shatter the ancient silence forever. The Sumerian tablets speak of omens in the water. The Enki and the World Order text, though later in composition, draws from older sources that describe the time when the deep first grew restless. The watchers below felt it in their element. The water itself was changing. According to the fragments from Nippur, the water began to move with purpose. Where before the currents had flowed in ancient, random patterns, now they swirled and organized themselves. The deep watchers recognized this as an outside influence, something imposing order on their realm of primordial chaos. Above the water, the perpetual clouds began to break. Not naturally, the texts insist, but as if pushed aside by an invisible hand. For the first time since the beginning, direct light from beyond pierced the veil. The scribes describe this light as the fire of the upper place, and they say it burned with a color unknown to earthly eyes. The plants of the twilight world, adapted to the dim and diffused light, began to wither where this new radiance touched them. The volcanic islands, previously shrouded in mist, stood revealed in sharp clarity. And in that clarity, something descended. The moment of contact is described in the Epic of Descent, a text so old that even in Sumerian times it was considered ancient. The tablet speaks of the boat of heaven that is not a boat, and the fire that does not burn. What descended from the clearing sky was beyond the comprehension of the intelligence that watched from below. The Anunnaki had arrived, but the texts make clear that they did not arrive as conquerors or colonizers, not at first. The earliest fragments suggest they came as explorers, perhaps even refugees, seeking something in this twilight world at the edge of the cosmos. The word Anunnaki means those who from heaven to earth came, but the older texts use a different term, Dingir Ma, which translates roughly as the supremely noble spirits. They were beings of pure energy and consciousness, able to take physical form, but not bound by it. 7 of them came first. The texts name them Anu, who would become king of the gods; Enki, the wise one who loved the waters; Enlil, who commanded the storms; Ninhursag, the mother; and 3 others whose names have been lost to time. These 7 walked upon the steaming volcanic stones and beheld the twilight world. And the deep ones watched. The primordial intelligence of Earth observed these beings of light and energy, and for the first time in the existence of the world, 2 forms of consciousness regarded each other across an unbridgeable gulf. The tablet of ancient disputes, found in the deepest layer of the Eridu excavations, describes what happened next. The watchers of the deep did not welcome the visitors from above. The Anunnaki represented everything the primordial beings were not: light where they were darkness, order where they were chaos, purpose where they were contemplation. The deep ones rose against the newcomers, not with violence as we understand it, but with the full force of the primordial waters. The ocean itself became their weapon, waves rising higher than mountains, seeking to sweep the beings of light back into the sky from whence they came. But the Anunnaki were not defenseless. The texts describe Enlil calling forth the winds, not the gentle breezes of later Earth, but cosmic storms that tore at the water itself. Enki spoke words of power that froze the rising waves in midair, transforming them into strange crystalline structures that hung suspended between sea and sky. The battle, if it can be called such, lasted neither hours nor days. The Sumerian measurement of time had not yet been established, for the sun did not yet shine clearly. But when it ended, both sides withdrew. The frozen waves eventually melted back into the sea. The Anunnaki remained on their island, but ventured no further. It was Enki, the texts tell us, who made the first approach. The wise one descended into the deep, protected by his power, seeking not to conquer, but to communicate. The tablets describe this meeting in terms both poetic and strange. The light spoke to the darkness, and the darkness listened. The above met the below, and understanding was born in the waters. What passed between Enki and the primordial intelligence remains largely unknown. The scribes who wrote these texts either did not know or were forbidden to record the details. But we know the result. A pact was made. The deep ones would withdraw to the abyssal places and not oppose the Anunnaki. In return, the beings of light would transform the world above, but leave the depths untouched. The age of sharing had ended before it truly began. The earth now had two realms, the depths that belonged to the ancient consciousness and the surface that the Anunnaki would reshape according to their vision. The Hymn of the Separation of Heaven and Earth, one of the most complete texts in the Sumerian corpus, describes the first great work of the Anunnaki. They would clear the sky and reveal the cosmos beyond. But this was not merely an atmospheric phenomenon. The tablet suggests something far more profound. For 7 periods, the texts use U4, which could mean days or longer epochs. The Anunnaki labored. They sang. The tablets tell us songs of power that resonated with the fundamental frequencies of matter itself. The clouds that had shrouded Earth since its beginning began to respond. Anu, the leader of the expedition, spoke the word of command. The tablets preserve it phonetically. Ankia, which means, let heaven and earth be divided. And at that word, the primordial veil tore asunder. The texts describe the moment with awe that transcends translation. The surface of Earth saw true sunlight for the first time. The stars of the galaxy became visible in the night. The moon, which had always existed but never been seen from below, appeared as a silver disk in the newly clear sky. But the transformation was not only above. The direct solar radiation began to change the world itself. The perpetual mists evaporated, revealing the true extent of the primordial ocean. The volcanic islands, now clearly visible, seemed small and scattered in the vast waters. The Anunnaki looked upon the cleared heavens and saw their path home. The tablets record that Anu wept at this sight, though whether from joy or sorrow, the text does not say. They had accomplished the first step of their purpose, but now the true work would begin. The Enki and Ninhursag text, though fragmentary, describes the second great work. The world was still almost entirely water. For the Anunnaki's purpose to be fulfilled, land must be raised from the deep. But this could not be done through power alone. It required something more subtle. Enki, who had made peace with the deep ones, spoke to the primordial waters as one speaks to a living being. He asked permission, the texts claim, to reshape the surface while leaving the abyssal depths untouched. And the waters, perhaps remembering the pact, began to respond. The tablets describe it as the gathering of the waters into their appointed places. But this was not a miraculous instant transformation. The text indicates it took many cycles of the newly revealed moon. Slowly, painfully, the primordial sea separated itself into distinct bodies of water. As the waters withdrew, they revealed the true face of Earth. Vast plains of sediment, deposited over eons by the processes of the covered world. Mountain ranges that had existed as submerged ridges. Valleys that had never known air. All of it revealed now under the clear sun. But the tablets make clear that this separation was not total. The deep ones retained their realm, the abyssal places where no light would ever reach, where the original waters still held sway. The surface waters were new, separated, diminished. The ocean depths remained primordial and untouched. The Tablet of Boundaries, a text found at Ur, describes the establishment of what it calls the threshold of descent, a place in the deepest ocean where the realm of the Anunnaki ended and the realm of the Ancient Ones began. No being from above was to cross this threshold. No consciousness from below was to rise beyond it. With land and sea separated, with sun and stars visible at last, the Anunnaki began their third great work, the creation of a new form of life. The Epic of Dilmun, one of the most beautiful Sumerian texts, describes how Ninhursag, the mother goddess, walked upon the new land and found it barren. The volcanic plants of the twilight world had died under the fierce sunlight. The land was empty, sterile, waiting. Ninhursag spoke to the soil, and the tablets tell us she wept. Her tears fell upon the earth and became the first springs of sweet water, distinct from the salt ocean. Where the fresh water flowed, Ninhursag planted seeds. But these were not seeds from earth. The texts make this clear. She had brought them from the distant realm of the Anunnaki, from gardens that grew under different stars. The tablets call them the seeds of the upper place, life from beyond earth. Under the direction of Enki and Ninhursag, the first garden took shape. The tablets locate it in Dilmun, which scholars identify with the head of the Persian Gulf, though the geography has changed dramatically since those ancient days. Here, in this river valley between the two great waters, the Anunnaki created their first home on Earth. But the tablets make an intriguing claim. They say that Enki, walking by the boundary waters one day, saw something that gave him pause. In the shallows, where the surface sea met the land, life was emerging naturally. Small creatures, neither plant nor animal, growing from the interface between earth and water. The texts record Enki's words, "Behold, the earth itself knows how to create. We have seeded the land, but the waters seed themselves. Life calls to life, and form shapes form. We are not the first makers, only the most recent." This observation would prove crucial. The Anunnaki could reshape the surface, could impose their will upon the elements, could even create life from seeds brought from distant stars. But Earth itself possessed a creative force, an evolutionary drive that predated their arrival. The deep ones were proof of that. Intelligence had arisen here without any outside intervention. Two forms of life now existed on Earth: the designed and the emergent, the cultivated and the wild. And in time, these two streams would meet and mingle, creating something neither fully Anunnaki nor fully terrestrial, something new. The Tablet of the Assembly of the Gods, one of the most enigmatic Sumerian texts, describes a debate among the Anunnaki. They had transformed the surface world, had made it suitable for their purposes. But now the question arose: what was that purpose? Why had they truly come to this remote world at the edge of the galaxy? The texts preserve fragments of Anu's speech. He speaks of their homeworld, the planet the later Babylonians would call Nibiru. He describes it in terms that modern scholars struggle to understand: a world that exists in a different relationship with space and time than Earth, a place of pure energy and consciousness made manifest. But something was failing in that realm. The tablets speak of the dimming of the light and the cooling of the first fire. The Anunnaki, beings of pure energy, were losing their ability to maintain their non-physical forms. They were being forced into materiality, into the limitations of fixed form and substance. They needed something to stabilize their existence, a substance that could anchor their consciousness in physical form while preserving their essence. The Sumerian word is kugsig, which later meant gold, but in these ancient contexts seems to mean something more: a material that bridges the gap between energy and matter. Earth, the tablets tell us, was rich in this substance. The geological processes of the twilight world, the volcanic activity, the separation of the primordial waters, all had concentrated this precious material in the crust of the planet. The Anunnaki had come not to conquer, but to harvest what they needed for their very survival. The Atrahasis epic, though later in composition, draws on older sources that describe the mining operations. The Anunnaki themselves descended into the earth to extract what they needed. They who had shaped the world with thought and song now labored with their increasingly physical hands. For 40 periods, the text uses shar, which some interpret as years, others as longer cycles. The Anunnaki labored in the mines. The work was transforming them. Each day spent in the earth, each moment handling the dense material substance, made them more physical, less ethereal. The texts record their growing discontent. Enlil, who commanded the work, became harsh and demanding. The laborers grew weary, and slowly a divide opened among them. Those who spent time in the mines were becoming different from those who remained in the gardens above, managing the transformed surface world. The Song of the Rebellion, a fragment from Nippur, describes the moment when the mine workers refused to continue. They came up from the depths and stood before the garden of Dilmun, their tools cast aside. They demanded that others share the burden or that a new solution be found. The crisis divided the Anunnaki into factions. Some, led by Enlil, wanted to force the workers back into the mines. Others, led by Enki, argued for a different solution. And it was in this moment of crisis that Enki proposed something that would change the destiny of Earth forever. The creation of man texts, found at multiple Sumerian sites, all describe what Enki proposed. He had been observing the natural life of Earth, the creatures that were emerging from the evolutionary processes of the planet itself. And he saw potential. There existed on Earth, the tablets tell us, creatures of flesh and blood that walked upright. They were primitive, barely more than animals, but they possessed hands that could grasp tools and minds that could learn simple tasks. Enki proposed to modify these creatures, to enhance them, to create workers who could mine the precious substance the Anunnaki needed. The debate was fierce. Ninhursag argued that creating such beings was a violation of natural order. Enlil worried about the dangers of uplifting lesser life forms. Anu remained silent, contemplating, but the rebel workers from the mines added their voices. Anything was preferable to returning to the depths. In the end, necessity prevailed. The decision was made. The Anunnaki would create a new form of life on Earth, a hybrid of the natural evolution of the planet and the genetic engineering of the star-born gods. They would create workers who could delve into the earth on their behalf. They would create humanity. The texts describe one final moment before the creation began, a period of preparation, of gathering materials and knowledge, but more than that, a moment of reflection. The Anunnaki seemed to understand that what they were about to do would irrevocably change both Earth and themselves. The Lament of Enki, a beautiful and melancholy text, records his thoughts. He had loved the primordial waters, had made peace with the deep ones, had witnessed the emergence of natural life on Earth. Now he would intervene in that process, would shape life according to his will, rather than allowing it to unfold according to its own nature. Ninhursag, too, expressed doubt. The tablets record her prayer to the unknown source of all existence. I have planted seeds from far worlds in this soil, and they have taken root. Now I will plant the seed of intelligence in creatures of this world. Will they take root? Will they flourish? Or have I become a gardener of sorrows? In the depths, the primordial consciousness observed and waited. The pact had been kept. Their realm remained untouched. But they knew, in their ancient way, that the surface world was about to change forever. The isolation they had accepted would soon be tested in ways none could foresee. The moment had arrived. The Sumerian texts become poetic here, speaking in metaphor and symbol about what was to come. But the core message is clear. Humanity was about to begin, not as an act of divine whim, but as a solution to a problem, a creation born of need. The creatures of Earth did not know what awaited them. They lived their simple lives at the edge of the garden, gathering food, avoiding predators, existing in the eternal present that all animals inhabit. They did not know that gods observed them, that plans were being made, that their descendants would inherit the earth itself. The transformation of the Anunnaki was nearly complete. They who had descended from the stars as beings of pure energy now stood on the earth as flesh and blood, breathing air, feeling the warmth of the sun on skin that had become real. In creating workers, they had also created the conditions of their own exile from the purely spiritual realm. Two worlds existed now on Earth: the designed and the natural, the cultivated and the wild. And from the meeting of these two worlds, from the mingling of star-born intelligence and earth-evolved life, something new would emerge. The texts end here at the threshold. The story of what came after, the creation of humanity, the building of civilizations, the conflicts and loves and sorrows of the gods and their created workers, All of that is recorded in other tablets, in other texts. But this part of the story, the part that came before, the tale of the twilight world and the primordial waters and the beings who descended from distant stars to reshape a planet, this part is almost forgotten now. It survives only in fragments, in texts so old that even the ancient Sumerians considered them to be from the dawn of time. And yet, the story has reached us. Across 5 millennia, pressed into clay by anonymous scribes, the memory of what came before has survived. The memory of a world that was silent and covered, waiting in darkness for the light that would change everything. And in the deepest places, in the realms that remain untouched by human hands, perhaps the ancient ones still remember. Perhaps they keep the oldest memories of all, memories of the twilight world, the primordial peace, and the day when beings of light descended from the newly cleared stars. This was the world before they came. This was Earth at the dawn of time, when everything that would follow was still unwritten, still possible, still waiting in the silence of potential. The Sumerians who wrote these tablets are gone. Their cities are dust. Their language is dead, but their memory remains, pressed into clay, waiting in the earth like seeds that refuse to die. They remembered what came before because they believed the past held the key to understanding the present. And perhaps they were right. Perhaps in understanding where we came from, whether shaped by gods from the stars or emerged from the earth itself, we can better understand what we are meant to become. The question remains, whispered in the dark water, sung in the wind across the desert where the old cities once stood. Are we alone in our consciousness, or are we the children of a meeting between two worlds, the children of earth and stars, of darkness and light, of the ancient and the eternal? The tablets do not answer this. They only remember, and in remembering, they ask us to consider what came before, what waits still in the deep places, and what will come after when our own cities have turned to dust and another people dig in the ruins, seeking to understand the strange beings who once walked this earth. This was the world before they came, and the deep places remember still. The texts referenced in this presentation are drawn from the Sumerian corpus housed in museums across the world. The Enuma Elish, the Eridu Genesis, the Atrahasis Epic, and countless fragmentary tablets preserve humanity's oldest continuous narrative tradition. While scholars debate the literal interpretation of these ancient accounts, there is no debate about their importance. These are the stories our ancestors told about the deepest questions of existence. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What is our place in the cosmos? The Sumerians invented writing to preserve these memories. They believed the past was not dead but living, not forgotten but sleeping, waiting to be awakened by those who would take the time to listen. We have listened. We have translated their words from clay to paper, from cuneiform to alphabets they never knew. And in doing so, we have recovered a vision of deep time, a story of the world before history, before memory, before even the gods as we know them. Whether these accounts describe literal events, symbolic truths, or something in between, they remind us that humanity has always looked up at the stars and wondered. We have always sought to know not just what is, but what was, and what might yet be. And in the deepest places, in the waters that predate all human memory, perhaps something still watches, still remembers, still keeps the oldest secrets of all.